opportunity to give this talk, which I've given the talk about Monet's garden for about 40 years. Okay, right up here in the front. And but this, I thought, I looked up online that the foundation is going to be going up to the Diment Museum in a couple of weeks when the big Monet show is opening there about Venice. And there's going to be over 100 paintings. And then I realized, this is the 100th anniversary of Monet's death. And then I thought, and it's 40 years, or 41, since I left my job in Carmel and moved to Giverny. So I was like, I think that counts for me to say that Monet's been a major influence on my life. And so I thought with this talk, and with the opportunity of having my own art show right up the street at the Sunset Center, that I wanted to make kind of a combination, kind of a weave. And so just in thinking of this different view of talking about Monet's garden really as his muse, because he lived in his garden for over 40 years, and it became his sanctuary, it became his great inspiration, but also for me to be going there for the last 40 years has been quite an influence on my life. As a writer, as a photographer, as a gardener, as an artist, and as a person who really, I would say, has devotion to the natural world. And I love the jungle, and I love the Amazon, and I love the deep forest, and I love a lot of places that have really a lot of vibration from the natural world. And it's kind of funny to also love a very cultivated garden. So I think that's something that's interesting within our own lives and our own, to have both the wild, embrace the wild, and embrace the cultivated. So that's how my life is. This is a picture from a couple of years ago at the Diment Museum when they had a big Monet show. And this is a famous photograph of Monet in front of his garden. And so they made it really big, and I thought, oh, good, I get to stand with him. And behind him is the house, if we saw the whole photograph. And so those are island beds of geraniums, 2 shades of pink, with the dianthus around the edges and the tree roses around it. Make sure this is good. So one of the iconic views of Monet's garden is, of course, the Grand Allée. And the Grand Allée is the axis of the garden. It takes you from the front door all the way down to the whole division of the garden, and then actually a beautiful gate, and then you go across that, and you would be at another gate, and you'd be at the footbridge to go over his water garden. So I'm going to show you many pictures of the Grand Allée in different times and seasons as it changes. And one thing, even though Monet is a very cultivated garden, he also embraced the wild. He liked to collect wild seed and to sprinkle it in the garden. He liked to have it both organized and that surprise, that orderly disorder. There you go down the Grand Allée and you have that gate. And in Monet's day, first he just had that garden, and later he was able to buy the land across the street that had a little river going through it, and from that dig out and make a pond and then create the water lily garden. And it's a wonderful moment when the roses actually reach across those arches. So when you're thinking of garden design, you're thinking of looking all over. A lot of people will just think of a little low thing on the ground, but you want to bring the eye up and you want to embrace the whole space. This is one of Monet's paintings. Not that great a picture of it, but it is the irises. And someone wrote to him and said, oh, I'd love to come see your garden. And he goes, well, come Tuesday. The irises will be great. And if you grow irises, they are really great today, but they're not something that lasts a long time. But he would grow big monochromatic schemes of one color. In the Grand Allée, this is more autumn, he raise the beds. So those beds are actually quite wide, and they're maybe 3 to 4 feet high. So then when you put something like sunflowers or dahlias on them in the autumn, you would really get a lot of height, plus those arches. And then you have a viewpoint that focuses the garden. And then you planted the nasturtiums, and throughout the year they grow across. So this is kind of midway. And there's one of his paintings, and I apologize, some of these paintings, they don't do it justice, but you get a little bit of an idea. Kim, do you think we can close that door just because of the light? Might be a little better. Continue to be thinking about the wild and the cultivated. And I think one of the biggest problems with creativity that many of us have is an addiction to perfection. So always be letting yourself go on perfection. Oh my God, I gotta tie up the roses. Oh my God, this isn't perfect. Oh, you can see forget perfect. Perfect is overrated. It never lasts, and you'll never quite get there. It just is something about self-judgment. So be in flow. And I think another thing that's really important is you can plan things, but always be in the moment of gratitude. Wow, look what's in bloom today. Be in curiosity. So one thing in Normandy, where Monet's garden is very well known for apples. And when he first moved to that garden, there was a lot of fruiting trees. And so he planted around them. And this is a painting he did when he first moved to Giverny of some of the, you can see younger apples in a field nearby. And then this is one of my paintings, you'll see in the show up there, that is apples in bloom in Big Sur. And there's more apples. I didn't at all, I only put these together when I was doing the slideshow a couple of days ago. I didn't do this on purpose. But this is my friend's orchard, and it's so great because they have this modest little house, these huge mountains. And when I go to her orchard, I always get a lump in my throat because I can feel the love. And this is a more abstract photograph of one of my paintings of reflection and movement and light. I like, again, we can see the wild happening. And here in my garden, I think I have a couple of pictures. This is like the mustard, or they call it rape. They make the oil from it, the yellow. And when the irises are finished, then that light yellow is coming. And that's his second studio back there that also is like a guest house. And his house is on the right. Lots of pathways, and his pathways are gravel. Most of them are straight pathways. I like a meandering path, but he let his plants meander, soften the edges. And the house has layers. This, of course, is the restored house. They allow the Virginia creeper to grow on the stucco house itself. Sometimes it completely covers, and sometimes it turns totally red in the autumn. And then they have the rose trellises, and then they have a little planting in front of it. But we'll see a few paintings of Monet's. That's a really abstracted painting, but that is a later painting of the house. And I just took that at the exhibition. But it was only 2 years before he died, he'd made this painting. So he was getting more abstract, and his house he was allowing to get more wild. Again, the house today with the layers, and the house that he painted, with the wild kind of light. Some people blame that on his eyesight because he did go through cataracts, but I think it's also that he walked into painting differently. He was always an experimenter. There's some more seats up here if you're interested. We don't grow this very often here because it takes a lot more water, but it's one of the lovely things about it, besides this foamy green, is that the leaves hold moisture and they make it look like mercury. And so its name is about the alchemy. something that Giverny has that we have is mist and fog. And this morning when I woke up early, everything was misted, and I was looking and realizing this is like a Monet, because that changes your sense of depth. It softens things, it softens the background, makes things in the foreground look different. Like there's hills back there, green hills, so it simplifies. And another late painting of his with the abstract and quicker brush strokes. I had the privilege of being able to show my photographs, some as big as a stage, in 7 museums with Monet's late paintings, and to help interpret the garden as his major work of art. So he created a lot of trellises. These are more the rectangle trellises. He had a lot of arching trellises. He had like an umbrella-shaped trellises to grow roses on. There you see some, and these triangular shape. So he's really working on bringing the blooms up into the sky. And then the playing of different colors and different bulbs, annuals, perennials, trees, fruiting trees. I saw a friend here yesterday, Shirley, her name's Shirley, and she would grow the Shirley poppies at Esalen. She was a gardener there for a long time. And to bring the wild in, yay, the lupins. And so I love it that when Monet would walk in the hills, he would collect seed, and then he would disperse the seed in the garden. So that's going to be all about surprise. There's a couple of seeds right up here. And the bulbs and the movement. So at my opening, which you're all invited to next week on Friday night, which is the day of spring, the opening of spring, I'm actually going to have 3 little dancers come, little ballet dancers, to help herald in the spring. And I think that at this time of so much division, so much stress, that one of the things that can ground us is the seasons and community and beauty and the ephemeral and some things that don't last a long time. Dance and music and bouquets of flowers and even the art of food and the art of looking at light. These are all ephemeral things that can bring us more into trust of the natural world. These I love, by Bascom. And many years ago, I redid the Del Monte Shopping Center gardens, and I planted these, and of all the thousands of plants I put in there, these had the most comments. I have them in my garden as well.
What did you call them?
Verbascum. Mm-hmm. They're also, the wild one is mullein, and they have a gray fuzzy leaf, and these big stalks that are yellow flowers, and then they get seed, and then you can use them almost like a magic wand to shake the seed. And then if you want to, once the flowers are finished, you can actually dip them into some wax, and you can make big candles from them. Yeah. So this is the garden in the autumn, and you can kind of see that cherry tree on the left. Monet planted, there was lots of fruit trees, and then he planted his garden around the fruit trees. And I personally feel that all gardens should have at least one fruit tree, because it helps us with the seasons, it helps us eat, it helps us get connected. And again, you're bringing the bloom, you're knowing seasons. This is me sitting in the gravel doing a little sketch. And it's not about the sketch being good, it's about the sketch being present. It's about sitting on the gravel, drinking in, looking well, falling in love with what you see, making the little sketch that is just a reminder of what I am actually seeing. It's a way of having presence. And we can do that if we let go of judgment. Otherwise we're like, oh, this is no good. I'm not even good. This is awful. I'm wasting my time. I'm blah, 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 blah. So we go in a loving presence, and then we're welcome. There's that tree again. And then you can see the greenhouses behind. So some of you know that I was a gardener here on the Monterey Peninsula in the late 70s, early 80s, and had 9 people working for me. And back then it was unusual to be a professional woman gardener. And left that to work in France, work in Monet's garden as a volunteer, work for free, because I fell in love. And not a person, but the garden itself. So to me, gardens and plants and trees are not just things, they are animate beings. I recognize the spirit in them. And so therefore I can really fall in love easily. Little sketches. So sometimes when I make these little sketches, they give me something to make bigger at home. And up at the exhibition, you'll see 3 different glass cases that we have. And in the glass cases are some of my sketchbooks, which I'm really happy to be able to share, and also some of my nature prints. And this is one of Monet's paintings of his pathway of irises in the spring with the blooming trees. The other thing to realize is we all love flowers, but also to pay attention to the foliage. So these irises, they have that sword-like foliage, and you could go, oh, but they don't bloom for very long. But I love their foliage, and that's a whole other design and element. And those of you that love flower arranging, you know how to play with your foliages. That's a big part of it. This is the garden next door to Monet's garden, Lily Cabot Perry. She was an American Impressionist, and she lived in that house for over 20 years. And so her garden, my friend restored it, is much more wild and has these big grasses. And I got to teach in Giverny a number of years. I brought 6 groups over there to paint in Monet's garden and to photograph, and I bring them next door as well. So that garden inspired this painting, and you can see a little bit more. Those are delphinium on the other side, and then those grasses, and this. So I'm really thrilled that one of them sold from the show, and it's going to pay for me going to the school, which I'm excited about. There's some foxglove. The island beds. This is that photograph that we started with me standing in front. That's the same part of the garden. More of a moving path. These slides are really bleached out, but this is one of my wild paintings. And abstracts, I mean, I love to do botanical illustration and detail, but also when I play with making abstracts, I usually sing into my paintings. I usually am thinking about light, and I'm trying to connect to spirit, and I'm trying to connect to spirit of place. And I want my paintings to have a vibration that can connect people to the natural world and connect people to the spirit in the natural world. That's what I care about. This is something I call painterly photography, and it's the old SX70 Polaroid, and taking a picture of it, and then you can draw on it. Of course, this is all old technology. And then I would enlarge it and print it on watercolor paper, and then hand paint it. And that's the edge of Monet's pond. And those are Pedicite japonicas, which are one of my favorite water-loving plants with big round leaves. And again, thinking of leaves and shapes. So Monet's pond with a wisteria arbor in the back, one of the bridges. And the bridge, we'll see several photographs of the bridge because it's very iconic, of course. and he painted it a lot. And he was inspired, there's so much to say, but Japan opened up. Japan had been closed, and when it opened up and they started to trade, then these Japanese woodblock prints started to come to Europe. And Monet was in Holland, and he bought his first blue and white piece of porcelain, Japanese porcelain. And what was it wrapped in, kind of like newspaper, it was wrapped in a woodblock print. And he's like, whoa, this is really cool. Well, he started collecting woodblock prints, and he had over 350 of them. And that was a big influence on the Impressionists, his woodblock prints, the plants. And so just at that moment in time, there was a big World's Fair, and in that World's Fair, they started to show unusual plants. So if you were a gardener, just like today, you want to have some cool new plants. So bamboo became a cool new plant. And this gave an automatic feeling of Asia. And of course, Asia was like this exotic, it still is, exotic, beautiful world that had its own spirituality, its own kind of plants, its own aesthetic, its own point of view. So as the Impressionists started to study them through the woodblock prints, then some plant explorers started to bring in these different plants, and Monet was inspired to make his whole water garden from that. And so making a water garden. And then there was only two kinds of water lilies, yellow and white. Somebody at the same time started to hybridize the water lilies. And at the World's Fair in Paris, they showed all these kind of water lilies. So of course that got people really excited. And that nursery, by the way, it has been restored. It's outside of Paris, a few hours south. And it's so beautiful. So to have this first, when he built this bridge, and it was a curved bridge, it was without the wisteria arbor. And he painted it quite a few times like that. And then he added the wisteria arbor, which is also something they do in Japan a lot. And he has both white and lavender wisteria on it. So it blooms two different times, it has two different looks to it. And then later in his life, and I'll show you a few paintings where he got really wild. I like people going wild. I think that's a good thing. It's like wild plants, wild people. If you are too constrained and too into perfect, then you're not really thinking for yourself too much. You know, you need to allow more freedom. That's my point of view. This is the boat dock, and again, Monet, put his beautiful arches in 3 directions on it. And when I was a gardener there, when Monet was living there, he had one gardener just assigned to the pond to keep it clean, because you want to have really good reflection, because in between, like this is clean today, you have good reflections. If it wasn't clean, you had a lot of moss and leaves and stuff, you wouldn't have the good reflections. But one time I was out there, and I wasn't a gardener, I was a photographer, and I was coming back, and they always gave me a place to stay. And so I was there, and I had my tripod, and I was standing in the little boat, this before digital was filmed, and I was photographing some close-ups and, balancing the boat, and I had this, it was like what the gardeners used to clean the pond, clean the moss off. It was like this big pole with a net on it, like you clean a swimming pool. Anyway, a friend called me and said, Liz, come back. So I got this thing, and I started to push myself to get closer, and by accident, very long handle, I knocked my camera with the tripod into the water. And that, that was the end of that camera. Luckily, it was the end of my trip, so, and I re-rolled it and saved that film. But anyway, I have a lot of stories about this place. That bloom, and of course, it's really, lotuses and water lilies have an important metaphor, spiritual metaphor, that they are growing in the mud, under the water, and they have to seek the light. And they seek the light, and then they rise above. But they are coming from darkness and muck. And it's a good metaphor for us. You know, when you're being challenged and you have difficulties, and how you sense the light and how you bring yourself back to blue. In Giverny, it's rains a lot. Normandy rains a lot. And when I was bringing my artists there, you know, we got this special permission to be able to be there at 7 a.m., go in the garden with the gardeners before the tourists to be able to take really good pictures. And then in the afternoons after the tourists left, we would be able to come back in. But oh my goodness, I mean, it could rain a lot. And when I first was a gardener there, coming from California, where we hardly have any rain, and we certainly do not garden when it's pouring rain, it was a big deal, especially being the only woman and the first woman to ever garden there. I have a lot of stories of the French not wondering how a woman would be a gardener full-time and how they would be a volunteer gardener, and I was only a volunteer because they couldn't pay me, and how to prove myself as really skilled. And so I had to do that. Isn't that beautiful? So you can see across the way, you can see his house with the chimney there. That's another idea when we're making a painting or we're making a garden or we're taking a photograph, is how we're going to frame the view. So by using all these arches, not only is he bringing the roses or the plants or the color up high, he's framing a view. And you think, kind of like music, you think of the rhythms, and the rhythms are the seasons, and what is going to be coming after and what's coming then. The movement. This is a photograph, and I used to teach painterly photography, and then we got into, everybody has an iPhone and they have all these apps, and you can put any of your photographs on an app and make it look painterly. So I thought I'd show you one. Yeah. So sometimes with Monet, one thing I love is that as he got older and stayed in place and didn't travel anymore and painted mostly his water lilies, and he became really, had a deep relationship. And some people called him the pantheistic priest, which I love that. I love that he was always challenged by them, because he was looking at reflections. He was making clouds in the water. He was the first Western painter not to paint a horizon line. He was looking at the grasses moving. He was looking at floated reflections. He was looking at blooming water. So this hadn't been done before. We take all of this for granted now. Up at my show, you'll see a long folded book that I made that has both my drawing and watercolor and some nature prints. And the nature prints, I have some nature prints of the willow and of the water lilies and my drawings of it. It's a combination. There's one of Monet's later paintings. So you see the sky, and you see the grasses, and you see the water lilies, and you see the reflection of the willow. And it's all on one surface. And as he was painting these are some daylilies. He was living during the war, World War I, and the war was going all around, and everybody had to leave. And he was an old man, and he said, the only thing I'm good for is to paint. And so his idea was to paint beauty, to paint the calmness, the ephemeralness, so that his vision was to make two oval rooms, bigger than this room, where his paintings would be on the walls and people could come in and their nerves and their spirits could be revived. It's a wonderful, incredible vision. So looking, we have the boat dock there. I'm very close to his late paintings. Those are my favorites and the ones I got to know the best because I got to travel with them. And I feel his vibration, and I feel his immediacy in them, and I feel the risk, and I feel how he has come to his own. Very different than when you're trying to please. And like his earlier paintings of big figures and so on, trying to get into being accepted in the great halls of Paris. Very different than when you're totally secure, you know what you're doing, you don't need the money, you're doing what you really believe in and what you love. This is one of his irises alongside the pond and with a reflection of the clouds in the blue. And it reminds me a little bit of a Hockney almost. I mean, it's just very illustrative and playful. There's another small late painting. This one was at you can see the signature here. And a lot of his late he would only sign his paintings when he felt it was finished. And so some of his paintings after he died were not signed. And then there's a couple of people, I knew his great-grandson, and Jean-Marie Toulegois, he was a good friend of mine, and he was one of the few people that could decide that this was truly a Monet, and then they had a special way to sign it, to authenticate it. So that was one. Monet also, if he didn't like a painting, he had them burned. He did a whole series of willow paintings, and they were he had the weeping willows by his pond, and they were about grief. He lost his first wife, and then his second wife, Alice. He lost his son. He only had 2 sons, and so many friends died, and then there was the war. So this sense of grief, weeping willows. Looking across the pond, you can see the willow trees. Reflections, whenever we have a body of water, even a small, modest water, like I just have a little bird bath, but it gets lots of activity, and you do have reflections. And reflections are, there I am taking some pictures of the pond at the boat dock again. Oops, sorry. This is one of Monet's paintings that he did at that boat dock, and there's only 2 of them. One is in Arizona that he did of this subject, and it took me years to ever see that in bloom. And I think that as a painter, we can always add more. As a photographer, you can't really add more flowers, but as a painter, you can always exaggerate. And me being able to draw, and you'll see the drawings I was making up there. The shapes, I love the shapes like hearts. And it's an interesting thing of looking down into the water and seeing those reflections, and then, as we said, catching wisteria, and seeing the brush strokes. I think the more you get sensitive to the natural world, the more you can get sensitive to one another. You will be able to feel paintings, and I really feel paintings. I can feel if somebody was connected when they painted them, or if they were doing it just to be sloppy or whatever. I mean, there's a whole lot of vibrations you can get from paintings. These I love because he was working quickly with a lot of paint. And this was, again, towards the end of his life. And it's important, literally and metaphorically, for us to make space to reflect in the garden, to have reflections, to reflect on our lives, to remember. This is me in my one of my happy spaces. This is a That's my dog Florabella. My friend took this. This is in the big redwoods, and one of my favorite things to do, I love gardens, but is to be in the forest and to paint the forest and to spend a lot of time in the forest, feeling the trees and hours. So yeah, she was just like laying back doing one of my sketches, and you'll see a lot of my watercolor sketches of trees. And then I come home to my studio, and then I paint big trees. But I do it through singing and through talking with them. This is one of my paintings. I love our woods around here, but one of the woods I love to walk in is over there in PG, and it's called Ripped and Wrinkled Park. And it has, I mean, it's pretty dynamic, because a couple of years ago we lost a lot of the pines. But it has, our coastline oaks are like dancing oaks. I mean, they are twisty. And during our pandemic, I brought a lot of children out there with me to be able to be in nature and us to paint together, because I think it's important. There's a Monet, 1917, of the reflections in the water lily. And of course, all these slides are not as good as the real thing by any means. One of mine. And that's just a little piece of one of Monet's of the water lilies. And it's bright light. There's some of the brush strokes. He actually had canvases woven that were thick, so that some, kind of like cardboard, so some paint could go underneath in the grooves, and some could be flicked on the top. Reflections. One of mine. And one of the. This is a late painting of Monet's too, of the Japanese iris. And I like that he got much more simple, you know. I thought, just yesterday, I thought, I should show you a few pictures of my garden, because it's an idea of gardens gone wild. And it's also a little artist community. That lower yellow building is my studio that I was able to build by taking all these groups to France and earning the money and selling my paintings. So now I can paint big, which is really a delight to me. And up above, that's the swing for all the children who come. And there's fairy mailboxes and things. And then the little red house, there's a couple of cottages. This was built by Charles Roll Peters originally. And I've been there 26 or 27 years on the restoration. There it is. So this just now, this isn't a fancy picture. It's, I just thought, well, we should show you what it is. But there's a couple of cottages and a big house in the studio. And I think, things that are simple and easy. I used to be into, like, what color and what season and rhythm and blah, blah. No, now it's succulents, geraniums. I think you get there at a certain age. And it's practicality, it's money, it's time. It's like welcoming them in the wild. Like today, everybody got fed. I was like so happy to feed everyone, like, grow, baby, grow, and pruning. And, but it's, and there's one of my Mirandine paths. My succulents, and I have a huge amount, I'm not even trying to show you how many I have. They all came from 2 bags, grocery bags, from 2 of my LOLs, little old ladies, who came to visit me for one of my open studios with, they each brought a bag. Well, bless their hearts, my whole garden has a whole lot of them. Most of my garden is either cultivated from the wild or from friends, or I collect seeds like Monet and throw them around. Yeah. So this, I love this one of Monet's. Oh, rushing through. That's the daylily by the pond. And then the bridge before you put the wisteria arbor on it. And the bridge with the wisteria arbor laid into his life. This is again a painting maybe 1 or 2 years before he died.
Which was when?
24. Yeah, or now I guess, is it 26? Maybe it's 26. So this is 100 years. Right now it's 100 years since he died. So it's 26. Yeah. Sorry, these are so poor. The time they opened up, I mean, the time they printed up here, that got really grainy. But you can see how thick the paint is, and the layers of really thick paint. And this painting, I love this one. It was considered his last painting. And it's a little bit bigger than that screen. And to me, it's kind of like a haiku. It's essence. You know, it's really important as we age to think of what is essence, what is really important, what is our, we don't have to go on and on. We go to what has the deepest meaning. It's kind of like clarity of writing or of being. So there I am, there on the bridge as my photographer self, the pedicites, and then one of my paintings at the end. So I'm happy, this painting's in the show, and I'm gonna be happy to walk you up there if you'd like to come. Can, yeah, any questions, and we can turn on the house lights. Yeah.
How many acres is this place?
It's not as big as you would think. It's about 4 acres. About 2 acres, and the water garden about 2 of the other.
How many bridges are there?
Oh, how many bridges are there? That's a good question. The main bridge is the one that we all, you know, with wisteria on it. Then there's a small bridge that you saw me photograph, and that is where the little app comes through. Those are the 2 people know of. And then there's 2 other bridges that kind of go in the back of the garden that, where the little creek, it's called the app, goes through. So there's 2 that go along there.
Were those bridges painted, the ones that we normally see is green?
Yeah.
Were they painted red or other colors also?
No. So the question is, what color, the green, were they ever red? Because Asia often uses red. No, he painted them green, but the truth is, it's the wrong color green. It's the wrong color green. Makes me crazy. His green was much more of a teal color, it's kind of a creamy teal color, and a color that was developed and very popular in French period of time, and you see it in a lot of, you'll see it at my house, you'll see it at Belle's house, you'll see it on a lot of furniture, you know, old French furniture. It's much more of a creamy teal color, and when they did the restoration, and the house was a softer pink, when they did the restoration, they didn't have that much sensitivity, and that they just said, oh, it's gonna fade. It's gonna fade, don't worry about it. Are you kidding me? Everyone photographs it, everyone, they repaint it, Kelly green, you know.
What green is it in Japan? What green?
Of their, Monet's, or in Japan?
Japan.
Oh, I don't know what color green in Japan. What we were saying, that a lot of times it would be like more of a red too. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Did he, as he got older, did he ever paint with assistants? You know, have people, like students come in and help with his paintings, or was he always pretty singular?
That's a good question. Was he always pretty singular, or did he have students or other people come in? He had his, there's so many stories I have, but he had his stepdaughter, daughter-in-law, who was also a painter that was his assistant. And she helped him tremendously. So he didn't have students come in. There was a lot in Giverny, there was a lot of American painters, a lot of painters from around all over who wanted to learn from the master and come to Giverny. And there was a hotel, Brody, that they stayed in, and you can look around Giverny and you can see all these skylights. And there were painters that moved there, but he didn't want to be bugged by them. I mean, I totally get it. You could be disturbed the whole day with people asking you questions and hanging out and when you have lunch. And forget it. You know, you gotta get some work done. So he only allowed certain people in, you know, but his second wife had 6 children. And some of them were, I think 4 of them were girls, and so there was different people that came in through the family, through the Hochet family. Yep. Who owns it now? That's a good question. When Monet died, he left it to his one remaining son, Michel, who kept it till the mid-60s until his death, and then he left it to the Institute of the Beaux-Arts, and he left it to they didn't want to leave it to the Louvre and to all those fancy people that rejected the Impressionists and rejected Monet. So it's like, forget it, you know, you don't get this. And so they gave it to, if you go to Paris, to go to the Marmottan is really important. Now they call it Marmottan Monet, you know, but it's a house museum. They got all the late paintings. And so the Institute of France inherited the house. It was not appreciated. It was not kept up. There was an old gardener next door that would kind of take care of things, but he, you know, drank a lot and he got elderly and it got overgrown and things leaked. And finally, the Vanderkamps, who had helped restore Versailles and had raised a whole lot of money to restore Versailles, a lot from Americans, they were asked, would you mind, could you, you're in this big castle, would you mind going to this little country place? It's kind of a dump, but you know, Monet had it. Could you kind of fix it up for us? So they went there, and Monsieur Vanderkamp, Michel Vanderkamp, he was like that tall and about like this big, and he had, you know, a caveat thing, and a cigarette holder, and a cane, and a big flower boutonniere, and he was also the president of the auction house, Christie's auction house in Paris, and he's very formidable. And so he was the one that was in charge of Versailles and was asked to work on it, restore it. And he was the one that I asked for a job to be able to work there. Because when I went to the garden, I just got a lump in my throat and I thought, oh my God, I'm in love. You know, I want to work here. And I want to know this garden. And my French friend said, well, Liz, spend the night and come back in the morning. I'm like, no, that's not like how I am. I want to be here. I want to put my hands in the dirt. I want to be here for seasons. And so it was a big deal to have an appointment with this man, Charles Vanderkamp, and then to make this offer that I would come and work for free. So they, in return, they built me a lovely apartment and gave me room and board. So I quit my job here, and I was living right here in Carmel, lovely house, just blocks from the beach. And there was a lot of little old ladies in my neighborhood, and we were good friends, and I was like, oh, I'm kind of, you know, a little torn, I love living here. And they said, no, go, you know, go, you can always come back and live in Carmel. You know, you should go, it's your chance. So anyway, that's how it happened there.
My daughter is going to Giverny with a friend, and I'm just wondering, what is something that she's been there, but it was a long time ago, what's something that you recommend?
When are they going?
This summer.
Okay. One thing that's going to be really cool is in the village of Giverny. I mean, it used to be totally sleepy. I couldn't even buy milk there. I mean, you couldn't even buy bread there. It was really hard. Now it is now a little too touristy from my point of view. But they made an amazing museum, and it's called the Musée Impressionniste. It used to be a Musée Americain, and they had all the American Impressionists. Now it's really given over to the French. Well, they're having, because it's Monet's 100th, they're having a retrospection of his, so they're gonna have a blockbuster show. So that is definite, that's a definite. And I like to go to lunch at Hotel Birdie outside. It's a lovely place just down the road.
What's it called again? Hotel?
Brody, Yeah.
Thank you.
yeah.
Did you get the feeling that Vanderkamp was that interested in Monet's garden to do something? Or he just was because he was asked to do it?
Oh, yeah, it wasn't this is a question about was Gerald Vanderkamp that interested in Monet's garden? Well, you know, he got the appointment of being in charge of Versailles because during the war, he saved a whole lot of paintings. And he used to like to say, I slept with the Mona Lisa. And he did. You know, he had taken the Mona Lisa, he had brought it down with a lot of other paintings, he put it in his bedroom, you know, he got to sleep with her. You know, people don't get to do that. So he was very appreciated and exalted. And so he got this, you know, incredible job to be at Versailles. And so Monet's garden, when it was kind of a, you know, disrepair, it wasn't that big a deal, but bless their hearts, they really, you know, I could say are not the right color green, but you know, they put a lot of energy behind it and really helped it be what it is today. So I think he got very excited. Barbara.
So you talk about, I have two questions.
Okay.
You talk about the evolution of his vision and his painting.
Monet's
and-
vision and painting.
Yes, right. And he used a lot of pastels, pinks, and blues, and early on, and as later, which you characterize as more abstract.
Mhm.
But the palette, the colors.
Very different. You're right.
Had changed.
You're right. Mhm.
And I wonder, is that really the way he saw at that point?
Mhm.
Or was it something else?
This is a very astute question, a sensitive question. So the change in Monet's palette from the early days, much more pastel, to the later days that were really much darker. And, you know, what was changing there? And I think there's layers of things. And of course, these slides really weren't the best of those paintings. But you're right, they were much darker. And part of that, and I have worked with eye specialists and people have written books about it and had arguments. Some of it probably was his cataract that he had to work. And back then, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people here have had cataract operations. Back then, you could go blind, and he only had one eye done, but you had to have big sandbags to keep you not to move for months. I mean, it was a really big operation. It's a big gamble. So that had to be part of it, his sight. But I think another big part, and he kept one eye, so he'd go back and forth, and he had special glasses and things. But a big part is going through the war, going through darkness, going through all this death, going through grief. That changes you. Also, the garden got a lot wilder. It wasn't all the perfect little pink things. It was more like overgrown. And you can think of when you're old and you can't prune everything, and you don't have all that money, you know, it's just different. And he is a different painter. Like, everything hurts, right? You're 80, 87, 86, you know, this hurts, that hurts. Oh my God, it's freaking cold in here, you know. You know, things change. But if you get to go to the Orangerie, or you go to the, the Met or something in Chicago, they have some of those big, huge paintings that he created for the Orangerie, and you'll see there's a lot of light in those paintings. There's a lot of light. There's fire in those paintings. This is all the sunlight reflected in the pond. So I think, like any of us, you see this piece and you don't want to make a big judgment on that piece. You want to see a breath, a whole array to be able to have we don't have a judgment, to have a sense of accomplishment, a sense of a life. And I really like it that it kept changing. I really like it. We as painters or as people, we think you're supposed to be consistent. Forget it. Life is not consistent. You know, you want to respond to who you are today. You have a disability, you have more wisdom, you have less time, you know, paint from that. Don't paint from your youth.
So that,
Oh, sorry, okay, she still has to stand.
so, my second question has to do exactly with what you were saying. How are you experiencing
Here.
your evolution?
Oh, God.
Your,
Is that word?
Yeah, it is. I was asking how she sees her evolution as an artist. I see a lot more abstraction, but what really gets to me is the energy, the vibrant energy of things. Yeah,
That's what it's about.
yeah. So,
Thank you, yeah, that's what it's about. Vibrant energy, yeah. And for me, that is fueled by the natural world. That is fueled by knowing the divine in nature. No, that might be radical, but hey, radical means you're from your roots. Rad is roots. Let's get it, yeah, sir. Here.
Did he just paint?
Now we figured this out.
Did he just paint in one medium? And I'm curious about your work as well, because it appears to be, you know, different in that respect.
Yeah, well, Monet painted in, Monet painted in oils. But then he had, you know, there were some pastels of his from different periods, but nobody sees the pastels. He had some sketches, you know, but he burned and threw away most of that stuff, you know.
But your work, is that oil?
Mostly mine is oil, but when I'm doing small, it's watercolor. Yeah, but it's hard to paint big. For me, it's hard to paint big in watercolor. And it's hard to get for me, it's hard to get the vibrancy in that. But yeah. So I've experimented with, like, I don't like acrylics that much for different reasons. For me. Yes?
Connecting to what you were saying, or that the colors changed. I have a loud voice, you don't
Okay.
know me. And, but could it also have been what was available? Did that change over the?
Oh, what paints were available?
Yeah, what was available, or?
That could be. But, you know, he had enough money, he could get whatever he wanted. He could get whatever he wanted. So I don't think that would be so much of it. Yeah. And really, it's the big, huge paintings that were quite impressive, quite amazing. So, yes?
One quick question. You mentioned many different apps available, apps for people to manipulate images and
display.
I just thought, I don't know if you've heard, I mean, we all know there's lots, but would there ever be one, or has there been one that's related to Monet, or could be created by someone like yourself who's an expert? I don't know.
I don't believe in that,
No.
but yeah, he was talking about apps on phones, or apps, you know, to play with making something painterly. And yeah, there was huge amount adopted, and I played with it, and I actually taught it, and I actually got to travel and teach and blah, blah. But it's only for play. Don't think of it, in my opinion, it's not a fine art. It's play. And if we can engage in what we see, and we can enjoy play, great. But it's not to be confused with, you know, the risk of, in my very opinionated opinion. Which I've done so. Well, I so appreciate, a lot of great questions. I so appreciate all of you being here. And I'm cordially inviting you to walk with me up there. Also, in case you're interested, there's a few Monet's Passion books. They're now out of print. They were in print for, I think, like 35 years. which is pretty amazing. And, but now they're out of print, just a year ago. And I also have I made a catalog of this show, if you're interested in that. And one thing we didn't talk about is nature printing, which I really love. And nature printing is, you can get, whether it's a tree round that you've prepared, or whether it's a plant or a fish, and you can put ink on it, and then you can put like a rice paper and use your hands and actually create a print from it. And then you can paint it if you like to. So that's something I have a couple of examples of in the show, and one is myself cut out, and I call her Interbeing, and she is all made with tree rounds. Let's see if
So you're not gonna try to narrate the show with all of us, or you just?
No, whoever wants to come up there, I'll talk to you about whatever. And then otherwise, in 1 week, on the 20th, we will have a festive celebration of spring, and that show with little dancers.
What time is it?
It's from 5 to 7. Yeah, should be really fun. Thank you.